It is mid-May 2026, and something profound has shifted on Ukraine's northeastern front. What was supposed to be Vladimir Putin's carefully planned buffer zone to shield Belgorod Oblast and keep constant pressure on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, just 30 kilometers from the Russian border, has instead become the site of a brutal Ukrainian counteroffensive that has flipped the script entirely. Vovchansk, a small town just 5 to 6 kilometers from the Russian border, was meant to be the linchpin of Russia's spring and summer 2026 offensive. Capture it, the Kremlin believed, and Russian forces could push artillery and ground units close enough to threaten Kharkiv directly, creating a permanent shield against Ukrainian strikes on Russian soil while tying down Ukrainian reserves. Putin was willing to pay an extraordinarily high price in men and materiel for what, on paper, looked like a modest territorial gain. Instead, Ukraine has launched a fierce counteroffensive in April and May 2026 that has turned Vovchansk from a Russian spearhead into a defensive nightmare for Moscow. Ukrainian forces are now advancing, eroding Russian positions, and striking logistics as far as 160 kilometers behind the front lines near Mariupol. Putin's buffer zone plan in the north has effectively collapsed at the tactical level, and the momentum Russia built through late 2025 and early 2026 is breaking apart under Ukrainian pressure. Welcome to the channel, everyone. I'm Dr. Elena. If you're new here, this is your no-spin deep dive source for military, geopolitical, and strategic analysis that cuts through the fog of war and explains what's really reshaping the battlefield in real time. Today, we're breaking down how Ukraine's Belgorod counterattack has upended Putin's entire northern strategy, what it reveals about Russia's broader vulnerabilities across the front, and why this moment in May 2026 could signal a deeper erosion of Kremlin initiative. If you want to stay ahead of every development in this fast-moving war, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. We're covering the Ukraine-Russia conflict with the depth and clarity it demands, and the next few weeks on the Kharkiv and Donetsk fronts may prove decisive. Let's start at the beginning of this reversal. In late 2025, Russia began massing significant forces in the Vovchansk sector as part of its broader spring-summer 2026 offensive blueprint. Units from the 69th Motorized Infantry Division, under the 6th Combined Arms Army, were redeployed alongside Kadyrov's Kadyrov Akhmat forces. The multi-layered objectives were clear: wear down Ukrainian defenses through small group infiltration tactics, sustained artillery barrages, and coordinated assaults; prevent Kiev from shifting reserves to the main effort in Donetsk; seize territory in Kharkiv Oblast to claim new gains on Russian state television; and most importantly, establish a buffer zone that would shield Belgorod Oblast from Ukrainian artillery and drone strikes while keeping Kharkiv itself under constant threat. If Vovchansk fell, Russian forces could position ground assets and artillery within easy striking distance of Ukraine's second city. That strategic gateway was worth the high cost in Putin's calculus. But Ukraine had other plans. In April and May 2026, Ukrainian forces launched a coordinated counteroffensive that reversed the trajectory on this front. At the heart of the breakthrough was the 23rd Assault Battalion, part of the Carpathian Second Corps within Ukraine's National Guard. These assault groups crossed the contact line, cleared forward Russian defensive positions, and pushed all the way through company-level fortifications in some of the most contested terrain on the battlefield. This was no small feat. Months of brutal fighting have turned Vovchansk into a wasteland. Half the town lies in ruins. Destroyed buildings pockmarked with shrapnel line every street. Rubble chokes the roads, turning them into obstacle courses. Every window is a potential sniper nest. Every crater or depression a possible minefield. Surveillance drones from both sides circle overhead 24/7, making any movement extremely risky. Advancing under these conditions is exponentially harder than defending. The attacker is exposed from multiple angles at all times, vulnerable to instant detection and fire. Yet the 23rd Assault Battalion succeeded. In their official statement, the regiment declared, The 23rd Assault Regiment continues to carry out combat missions in the front's most challenging sectors, demonstrating the effectiveness of coordinated assault operations. The results appeared swiftly on the frontline maps. Significant gains were recorded around the village of Staritsia, just 4 to 5 kilometers from the Russian border. Ukrainian forces are now within effective artillery and drone range of Russian positions on the other side. Forest clearance operations pushed Russian defenders back in the direction of Viluvatka, with Ukrainian units seizing positions right up to the village outskirts. In southeastern Vovchansk itself, Ukrainian troops recaptured ground and consolidated new defensive lines. When you assess these gains together, the picture is unambiguous. Russia's months-long effort to build a buffer zone has been reversed at the local level. The offensive momentum the Kremlin sustained in the Kharkiv direction through late 2025 and early 2026 has been broken. What was supposed to be Putin's shield for Belgorod has become a vulnerability. These advances were not isolated to Vovchansk. During the same period, Ukraine applied counterpressure in the Kupiansk direction and showed local activity near Svatove. Reports indicate Russian forces have been pushed back south of Kupiansk, a line long viewed as the axis for Russia's secondary buffer zone initiative in the northeast. Here, too, Moscow is struggling to achieve the depth it needs. Across the Kharkiv region as a whole, Ukraine is executing a consistent operational model. Russia attempts infiltration with small groups, constant artillery, and probing attacks. Ukraine responds with immediate counterattacks, clears the infiltrators, fortifies the recaptured ground, and establishes stronger positions for the next round. This hold, clear, fortify cycle is steadily eroding Russian momentum with every iteration. These are tactical gains rather than theater-wide breakthroughs that redraw the entire map. But every successful Ukrainian counterattack chips away at the Kremlin's narrative of undisputed initiative. Ukraine is demonstrating that it retains local offensive capacity, even in sectors where Russia has concentrated forces specifically to seize and hold the advantage. To understand the bigger picture, let's zoom out to where Russia's main offensive effort is actually concentrated in 2026. Independent observers have geolocated approximately 3,000 artillery, mortar, and airstrikes across the front from Zaporizhzhia to Donetsk between February and May. The data reveals two primary concentration zones: the Orykiv sector in Zaporizhzhia and the line just north of Pokrovsk. These two axes represent the core of Russia's planned summer 2026 offensive. A notable shift occurred in the Pokrovsk-Kostiantynivka sector. In 2025, Russia tried driving a wedge between Toretsk and Kostiantynivka. By 2026, the plan evolved into an attempt to encircle Toretsk from the southeast. Despite capturing some villages like Pisky and advancing near Marinka, Ukrainian resistance has held the front line largely stable in key areas. Russia has gained ground, but it has failed to translate those gains into decisive strategic advantage. Ukrainian units in the region, including elements of the 7th Rapid Reaction Corps, report inflicting 329 Russian casualties since early May, while destroying or damaging over 40 pieces of equipment, including artillery systems. Pokrovsk remains a grinding meat grinder, a reminder that Russia's war machine is still heavy, dangerous, and willing to absorb enormous losses. The Kremlin cannot back down here because capturing the full Donbass remains one of the cornerstones of Putin's political legitimacy at home. Yet the costs are accelerating. Hundreds of soldiers, hundreds of vehicles, and massive ammunition expenditure for every square kilometer gained. Heavy machinery requires reliable roads, staging areas, fuel depots, repair facilities, and secure supply lines. Disrupt those, and the entire offensive grinds to a halt. And Ukraine has begun doing exactly that. Footage released by the 1st Assault Aviation Corps shows Ukrainian reconnaissance and attack drones operating deep in occupied territory around Mariupol, 160 kilometers behind the front lines. These drones are tracking and striking Russian military movements on roads surrounding the city. The Institute for the Study of War has assessed that Ukrainian forces are systematically using drones for interdiction of Russian ground supply lines in occupied Donetsk Oblast. Geolocated videos confirm strikes on vehicles along the TO-509 Mariupol-Donetsk highway and similar operations along the M14 route toward Zaporizhzhia. Operationally, this changes everything. Russia's rear areas are no longer sanctuaries. A logistics driver who once believed the road was safe now operates under constant threat. Every delay, every rerouted convoy, every moment of hesitation slows the flow of supplies to the front. This is the drone-era version of battlefield air interdiction, not total paralysis, but accumulating friction that compounds over time. Ukraine hasn't liberated Mariupol yet, but Russian logistics around the city are no longer operating in silence. That alone is strategically significant. When you combine the Vovchansk advances in the north with the Mariupol drone interdiction campaign in the south, and the grinding attrition around Pokrovsk in the center, Russia faces problems on three simultaneous axes. In the north, Ukraine is closing in on the border, forcing Russian forces into a defensive posture. The buffer zone plan has collapsed tactically. Momentum toward Kharkiv has been broken. In the south, Ukrainian drones are hitting rear areas at depths of 95 to 160 kilometers. Convoys that were once secure are now hunted. In the center, despite the heaviest troop concentrations of the current phase, Russia has failed to achieve a decisive breakthrough around Pokrovsk. The cost per square kilometer is rising sharply. Across all three, the Kremlin's domestic narrative of continuous advancement and favorable momentum is cracking against hard operational evidence. The advances around Vovchansk carry consequences that go beyond the map. Kadyrov's Akhmat units were among the most active in this sector, and the Chechen leader had personally promised victory here. Ukrainian gains have made that promise hollow, potentially undermining Kadyrov's standing among nationalist circles inside Chechnya and beyond. Criticism that our borders are not being protected could grow. More importantly, Ukraine's positions now sit just 4 to 5 kilometers from the Russian border. This gives Kyiv not only psychological leverage, but real operational reach. Russian positions inside Belgorod Oblast are now within range of Ukrainian artillery, drones, and reconnaissance. Small-scale infiltrations, sabotage, and cross-border drone raids are increasing. While a large-scale repeat of the 2024 Kursk operation seems unlikely given Ukraine's current posture of active defense and incremental line improvement, the option remains on the table, and Moscow knows it. The methods Ukraine is using in Vovchansk are also shaping the future character of the war. The 23rd Assault Battalion integrated classic infantry assaults with unmanned systems at every level. Reconnaissance drones mapped trenches and bunkers before ground teams moved. FPV drones suppressed Russian positions while infantry advanced under cover. Humans and machines operated in tight coordination. This model is being applied across the front. Ukraine is simultaneously integrating new technologies, fiber optic drones controlled by physical cables that are immune to Russian electronic warfare, AI-powered turrets for drone detection and interception, and ground robots that have moved from experimental to operational. Over 2,500 robotic missions were reportedly conducted in the first quarter of 2026 alone. Ukraine is not just counterattacking. It is technologically transforming its defensive and offensive capabilities in real time, while Russia remains largely reliant on mass and attrition. So what cards does Putin have left? And how strong are they really? First, the summer offensive. The concentration of the 90th Tank Division around Pokrovsk and the Kharkiv sector signals Moscow's plan for a major push through Donetsk over the coming months. The logic is to compensate for northern losses by gaining ground in the southeast. But this offensive will likely follow the same high-cost attrition model that has delivered diminishing returns throughout 2026. Thousands of soldiers lost, hundreds of vehicles destroyed, massive ammunition expenditure, all for modest advances measured in single-digit square kilometers, while Ukraine's drone network grows more sophisticated weekly. Second, mobilization. Russia continues trying to close personnel gaps through successive waves of reserve call-ups without declaring full mobilization. The 2022 partial mobilization triggered mass desertions and unrest. A new full mobilization now would carry even greater risks, multiplied by 2 additional years of wartime fatigue, economic strain, and mounting casualties. Third, the energy war. Russia has spent 3 consecutive winters systematically targeting Ukraine's power infrastructure. The same strategy is being prepared for winter 2026-2027. Yet Ukraine has rebuilt and hardened its energy grid after every campaign, and Western allies are accelerating air defense deliveries specifically to counter this threat. Fourth, diplomacy. Putin uses the negotiation track to push for a ceasefire from a claimed position of strength. But frontline realities increasingly contradict that narrative. As long as Ukrainian forces hold and Western support continues, diplomacy creates pressure but delivers limited leverage. Fifth, the nuclear threat. It remains on the table but loses credibility with each passing month. The Kremlin has brandished this card for over 4 years without playing it, because the costs of escalation far outweigh the benefits of continued conventional warfare. Every card in Putin's hand is either risky, enormously costly, or declining in effectiveness. The northern buffer zone has collapsed. Southern logistics are under sustained drone interdiction. The central war of attrition is burning through reserves faster than they can be replenished. Russia can still attack. It can still advance in specific sectors and inflict painful losses. But it cannot advance in the directions and at the pace its original strategic plan required. The Kremlin continues drawing the map it wants on television, but the actual front line refuses to cooperate. It may still be premature to declare a definitive strategic turning point in this war. The conflict remains a brutal war of attrition with enormous stakes. But something real has shifted in the northeast that cannot be undone by Kremlin press releases or map graphics. For Putin, Vovchansk was never just a village. It was the gateway to Kharkiv, a vital buffer in his planning, and a matter of personal and political prestige. That gateway has now closed, not against Ukraine, but against the offensive that was supposed to open it. The Belgorod counterattack has been brutal, effective, and revealing. It shows a Ukrainian military that has adapted, integrated new technology, and retained the will and capability to seize initiative even under pressure. It exposes Russian overextension, logistical fragility, and the limits of an attrition strategy that demands ever higher costs for ever smaller gains. Dr. Helen R. Baer here. If you're tracking the Ukraine war, the Kharkiv front, or the broader implications for European security and global power balances, subscribe right now so you never miss an update. We will provide continuous coverage of Ukraine's northeastern counteroffensive, Russia's summer preparations around Pokrovsk and Kharkiv, the expanding drone interdiction campaign near Mariupol, and any signs that these pressures are forcing new calculations inside the Kremlin. Turn on notifications and share this video with anyone who needs a clear-eyed breakdown of what's really happening on the ground. The questions that matter right now are these. Does Ukraine's advance in Vovchansk force Russia to divert forces from its planned summer offensive in Donetsk to stabilize the north? Or will Moscow accept the loss of momentum around Kharkiv and double down on Pokrovsk and Kharkiv? Can the Mariupol drone interdiction campaign constrain Russian logistics at the scale needed to affect frontline outcomes? Or does Moscow retain enough redundant supply routes to absorb the disruption? And the question that goes to the heart of this conflict. If Russia's summer offensive follows the same high-cost, low-yield attrition model we've seen throughout 2026, at what point does the accumulation of strategic costs without corresponding strategic gains begin to alter decision-making inside the Kremlin? Drop your analysis in the comments below. I read every one, and the discussion here often cuts deeper than mainstream coverage. These are the developments that will determine whether 2026 becomes the year the frontline momentum truly shifts, or whether Russia finds a way to stabilize and grind forward once again. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay objective, and I'll see you in the next update as this story continues to unfold.